Hello everyone and welcome to the CIBSE Exchange, where we showcase some of the most interesting people in the world of building services engineering. My name is Ruth Carter and I am the Chief Executive of CIBSE. And to celebrate International Women's Day, we've brought together 4 of the brightest lights in our engineering world. So enough from me. I'd now like to hand over to our panel and let's start by introducing everyone. Annette, you're at the top of my screen. Would you like to start by introducing yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Annette Ash. I've been an engineer for 20 years. I've worked for electrical consultancies, electrical contractors, and have been working for universities for quite a long time now. And I currently work for Oxford University.
So based here in the UK?
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you, Annette, and welcome. And Annette is also chair of Champions Our Women's Groups within CIBSE. Fiona.
Hi, my name's Fiona Cousins and I live in New York City. I was born and grew up in the UK and I moved to the US in the mid-90s. I've been a mechanical engineer, building services engineer. Since I graduated high school, I got into engineering originally with an internship at Arup, and I have been working with them ever since.
Lovely, thank you very much and welcome. Farah?
Hi everyone, my name is Farah Naz. I am a building services engineer. I live and work in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And currently I lead the sustainability and specialist services for AECOM in Middle East, Africa and Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Farah. And last but not least, Lucy, welcome.
Hi everyone, my name's Lucy Sherburn. I'm a consulting engineer at Fairheat, so we're based in London in the UK. I joined Fairheat a couple of years ago in 2019 after graduating from the University of Sheffield, where I studied chemical engineering. And Fairheat are a specialist consultancy that focuses on heat networks and district heating. We mainly provide quality assurance services for the design and build and operation of heat networks.
Thank you, Lucy. And of course, you are also our latest CIBSE Young Engineer of the Year. So congratulations on that. And that's a really good segue then. So let's start talking about how did you get into this profession? What's your passion behind it?
So I think going back to school, kind of studying my A-levels, I really had no idea what engineering was. It kind of had never really been explained to me or was a career choice open to me until my chemistry teacher went to me. He's like, Lucy, you're good at chemistry and you're good at maths. Have you considered doing a chemical engineering degree? So I took a look at it and realised it combined everything that I enjoyed, all the subjects I was studying at the time, so maths, chemistry. I was studying economics as well, and I really liked that. So I think the first thing that drew me into it was so multidisciplinary. It combined all these aspects of all these subjects that I really enjoyed, and I think the main thing that got me into it in the end was the problem solving. Your solutions can actually have a real life impact. What you do, your work, you can kind of see that having an impact in the sector that you're working in. And yeah, I studied chemical engineering and then knew I kind of wanted to go into something sustainable, renewable, which is how I find myself in heat networks, and now kind of that sits within building services as well. But I think the main thing that attracted me to it was just this combination of all these subjects I enjoyed and being able to have your solutions having a real impact.
It's the ultimate octopus job, isn't it? The impact is so broad.
Definitely, yeah. And I mean, you've got to consider so many stakeholders. That's, I guess, the other aspect of it. But yeah, it's just great that you have so many, so many things to consider and so many parts of things that need to come together. But once it does, it's really rewarding.
Fiona, is that the same for you, or did it happen differently for you?
I think it's very disconcerting to hear that your career's advice at school was nearly as bad as my career's advice at school, although they did at least get you to chemical engineering. At the time that I was in high school, you could be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, and that was pretty much all anybody had ever heard of. Maybe a nurse, but that was sort of the options that were put in front of you. But I think that the things that you say about engineering are actually the things that I also really enjoy about it. The fact that it has a bit of creativity, it has a little bit of solid kind of problem solving, it has some really, really deeply technical things, it has some abilities to change the world, and it also has this whole thing about stakeholders and management and other things. There's not only the what you're going to do, but there's the how you're going to do it and the why you're going to do it are all kind of really big components of engineering practice. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm still here and still doing it and still finding it fascinating.
Thank you, Fiona. And Annette, was the careers advice as good for you?
Yeah, basically. I think my route was slightly different. I had my daughter first, and then I was training to be an electrician, and my college professors, they suggested that, and they actually put me forward to become a junior engineer, and I started from there, and I just loved it. As soon as I started in engineering, I love the challenges, and I suppose what inspires me and what keeps me going is the fact that one engineering solution has numerous different objectives which are all equally important. And I suppose that's similar to what Lucy and Fiona said, in the fact that we have to consider so many things as part of an engineering design. It just keeps it very interesting. Okay,
and Farah, finally from you, any different for you, or what attracted you?
I wanted to become an architect from when I was 7 years old. And I went to university, but I grew up in a very engineering household because my father was a civil engineer and used to discuss big drawings and working in infrastructure project. So I went to university to become an architect, but the first 2 foundational years in Boston, I realized that I was more inclined towards engineering. I really like the problem solving aspect of engineering. So after 2 years of doing a foundational degree in both architecture and engineering, I decided to move and do building service engineering because I felt like that was more like creating the lifeline of buildings. And here I am, still a building service engineer. So that's how I got into engineering.
Thank you. And a lot of you have talked about making a difference and this wonderful start to finish piece. Our world, the world of the building service engineering, is dramatically changing, though. So we're seeing a real landscape shift. How do you see that role changing, let's say, over the next decade? Annette, can we kick off with you on that?
Well, I
easy
think
question for you to start with.
Sustainability is one of the ever-growing biggest concerns that we as engineers have, and I think going forward, building designs will continue to become a lot more collaborative early on in the design process, because I think historically it used to be that an architect would put a design together, and every other discipline would put their design together, and it would all come together at the end. But I think going forward, for us to meet those energy targets that are so important to us, I think that early collaboration to reduce the overall carbon footprint of the building will be, and to develop innovative design solutions as well that integrate the needs of the other disciplines. So it's all about early collaboration, which will resolve those issues going forward, I think.
So that's very easy to say. It's less hard to deliver on. What are the things that we need to be doing in order to make that shift, do you think?
I think every person working within the industry needs to just be more proactive in getting involved in designs and talking about the impacts that certain building designs may have on other services. For example, if a building is built in a certain way, it may have a higher energy demand. So it's important to have those early conversations. And I think that I've already noticed a shift within building design, that there are a lot more early collaborative meetings going on to talk about these issues and talk about what solutions can be utilised to reduce the impact of the building.
Okay, thank you. Fiona, you're nodding away there. What's your thinking?
I think you asked about sort of big challenges, and I think that there are, you know, sort of 2 or 3 big challenges that I think CIBSE and CIBSE members are sort of perfectly positioned to think about. And the first one of those is obviously in the carbon emissions world. You know, we are the people who design the systems that use all of the energy in buildings, and therefore we've got a huge area of impact there. And we can also influence beyond that, as Annette says, you know, influence the sort of design partners in the project. But I think there are 2 other things that are also very much in CIBSE's world. One of them is about comfort and well-being of people inside. I think coming out of the COVID crisis, there's a whole lot of things about, well, what should ventilation be like? I've never read so many badly written articles by journalists about how ventilation systems in buildings do or don't work, most of which, you know, they just start from the wrong starting point. But ventilation systems in buildings really do matter. I think they matter in COVID, they matter outside of COVID, they matter to how your well-being is, but they also matter in the middle of a pandemic to particular things. I think there's a huge area of expertise there that we should be thinking about and using our expertise to drive change. And then the third one is around safety. And of course, we have lots of fire safety engineers and ventilation engineers within CIBSE as well. And all of that piece about how do you control smoke, how do you control fire, how do you make sure the buildings are fire safe? It's all not just us, but it's very much within the kind of remit of the work that we do. So I think that as we kind of enter the climate crisis, but also the social equity crisis, and to a lesser extent the nature and environment crisis, I think that CIBSE has sort of several points of influence. And we should actually be thinking about how should that influence be greater? How do we do it on an individual level? How do we do it at an institutional level? How do we do it at a company level? And you know, that's where I think our sort of direction forward is.
One of the observations that's given to me an awful lot by CIBSE members or the community that we're in is actually our voice isn't loud enough, and we're still carrying a bit of not legacy baggage, but we're less confident about pushing ourselves forward. Is that fact? Is that changing? Are we doing something about that? Fiona, where do you feel that's moving?
I think, you know, I hate this story, but it's also kind of a true one. I used to have a boss, and his best joke was something along the lines of, how do you tell an extrovert engineer? And the answer is, he's the one who looks at your shoes when you're talking to him rather than his own or her own. I've used his on purpose in this particular case. So I think that this piece, I mean, it's a stereotype, but I think that there is a piece about the confidence and the courage to move forward to actually have that broader influence. It's much easier to solve the problem that's right in front of you, that you're being paid to solve or that you have volunteered to solve, than to broaden that problem out and then try and influence people who are not necessarily within your immediate remit. But I think that to get that influence, you have to broaden out the problem and try to change things that are beyond the very narrow thing that you're working on at that moment.
Thank you. And Lucy, you'll have might have a different view as an early career engineer. Where's your head? What do you think the fundamental changes are going to be?
I think the points that have been spoken about so far, so climate change and safety, they're the big ones. But I think the other things we're going to have to consider over the next decade is the objectives are going to change, and the parameters around us are going to change. So we're going to have to start designing buildings that are they're going to be impacted by future effects of climate change. We haven't considered those yet, what they might be. So there's going to be a huge, like a 1 in 1,000 year event now is happening quite frequently. So we're going to have to start considering those events. And I spoke about this in my the presentation for the award. We've got a huge amount of existing buildings already that are going to exist in 2050 when we have our net zero targets. We need to really think about how we're going to retrofit those buildings, as well as all these new great green sustainable buildings that we can design. But I think the biggest challenges lie within how we're going to retrofit existing buildings to be clean and low carbon, and also still provide residents with comfort, and the building achieves its goal.
And what would you say to people that say that's almost too hard to do? So we have the UK, for example, has a huge swathe of old buildings. It's almost too difficult to do. What would be your pushback on that?
so that we're just going to have to do it. We're going to have to kind of question the norm and push the boundaries and try find solutions to it, because I kind of don't really have a choice. But it's going to be costly and it's going to be hard. But I also kind of mentioned inertia in the award speech, and that resistance to change. People are resistant to change the way they live their lives or the way they design buildings, or everyone's just quite happy going along with the norm. But we're really going to have to start questioning the way things are done and push forward with it. And I think, especially as a young engineer, I guess you may not be as exposed to how things have been done for the last 20, 30 years. And as a young engineers probably really need to start questioning how things are done, bring their fresh ideas and perspectives and solutions to address these challenges.
Thank you. And Farah, where you are, you have the total opposite problem, don't you? So what's your feeling about how the world is changing?
I think the world is changing really, really rapidly, especially the climate and biodiversity emergency that was declared, and especially after COP26, where entire world, different cities of the world are actually going and agreeing to a net zero transition. So as building services engineer, I see two big ways that we can actually help with this transition. One is a digital transformation, and the second one is net zero transition. So Annette, Lucy, and Fiona touched on the net zero transition, so I won't go much deeper on that. But on the digital transformation side, I think as building service engineer, we truly have a big role to play, how all these cities collect data about their cities, about the health and well-being of buildings and energy, and take these cities into this journey of digital transformation. There's also, I think, that our role as building service engineers will change in the future in terms of the scale we think, because we think in a building scale. A group of buildings makes a neighborhood, group of neighborhood makes cities. To truly make net zero transition, as building services engineer, we have to start thinking from a building level to a city level. And I've been working in 4 different continents for the last 20 years. And what I've found is that every master planning and city planning project I worked on, there are groups of building service engineers who are actually influencing the decisions of energy transition in the city level. And that's truly quite the transformation, because they're thinking not just a building level, but taking that knowledge and applying in a city level. So for me, scale of way we think and act and create our future cities, as CIBSE and building service engineers, we have a huge role to play to transform our cities towards equitable, resilient, and green cities. So these are the 3 main aspects that I see as our changing landscape for CIBSE and for our profession.
I think that's really interesting. There's a terminology I'm picking up more and more, which is the decisive decade, about the 2020s. And actually the role that we play in that is quite significant, because, Lucy, to your point, we don't have an option. To that point then, Lucy, I want to come back to you on this. What are the skill sets? So sitting where you are and developing a fast pace of new skill sets, what are the ones that smart engineers need to be embracing? What are the new things that we need to be mindful of?
Good question. I think you need to be willing to, willing to be open to questioning what's been done already, willing to learn new things, be open to educating yourself and learning from other people, learning from other examples of how new buildings have been, or as you say, districts or neighborhoods are now becoming these like smart cities. We need to be willing to kind of communicate well between each other and be transparent and open. I think those are some really, really key skills. And also, I guess everyone says this, but teamwork, isn't it? Like, building services don't work independently. They rely on lots of other engineers and lots of other stakeholders, and we need to all kind of really be collaborative together to enable that transition to be successful.
Thank you, Lucy. Annette, what would you, and your cat? What does your cat think about this? So I have my own cat sitting there as well, so I'm glad it's you and not me. What would you add on to that, Annette?
I'm sorry, I got a little bit distracted by the cat.
I'll come back to you in a second, Annette, then. So Fiona, what would you add on that?
I think that this question about the skill sets, I think is an interesting one. So I think being open to questioning, being open to thinking about, you know, the how of how things get done, as well as the what needs to be done, is actually quite. I mean, there is a skill set in there. There's a skill set about how do you bring people along with you that I think is not one that necessarily comes very naturally. I think there's also that's sort of the interpersonal skill. How do you bring people along with you? But I think there's another skill, which is how do you see what is driving other people? How can you sort of empathize with the things that are making a difference to them? So can you see, you know, I guess the phrase I'm searching for is, you know, follow the money. It's not always the money that is the motivator, but it's finding the motivation for whatever it is that somebody else is trying to do, and then figuring out whether what you need to do or want to do can also be aligned with that. So I think there are a whole series of things about motivation and persuasion and influence that I think are really important skill sets to bring along.
And do building service engineers embody those skills, or is it something we're going to have to learn and develop?
Well, you know, I hate to stereotype, right? I've said engineers are stereotypically a little bit introverted and very much task focused. So I think if you addressed a stereotype, you would say, yes, of course, we must do things to improve people's skills in those areas. But you know, there are all sorts of people in engineering, and some of them are extremely good at those things, and so it's more a question of finding the right people with the right skills within the industry, and learning, recognizing that we actually all need to be developing our skills for our whole career, and that some things that may feel a little bit off topic are actually completely on topic when it comes to how you have influence, especially how you have influence.
There's a real culture of lifelong learning within the engineering base anyway, but it's this serendipity learning, you know, something that you didn't know was going to influence you, suddenly coming from nowhere. Annette, what would you like to throw into the mix?
I was just going to add that I think that energy performance targets for buildings has motivated clients to sort of put that effort into getting teams together initially to achieve those results, and I think if CIBSE can continue to drive just more stringent energy performance targets and promote the benefits of that early collaboration and meeting those targets, and I think it would help clients or the initiators of buildings or even refurbishments of buildings to understand the need to put in that funding at an early stage to get people together and come up with the most advantageous results in the long term.
And there's always a disadvantage, Farah, of going last. What could you add to that?
We are in a challenging time and a transformative time with climate emergency. And I agree with what's all been said, but I think the two key words for our industry and for our profession is co-creation and collaboration. And that kind of links into all the things points that have been discussed by other panelists. And those two, co-creation mindset and collaboration mindset, links in very well with the CIBSE knowledge portal we have and all the brilliant guides and knowledge we have. But as building service engineers, it's also very important to understand that our horizons are expanding with this climate crisis, net zero transition. So being open and adaptive to that co-creation part, where we are having conversation with computer geeks and digital transformation and other people and architects and script writers are extremely important, because that transformation is going to impact the way we think, create, and build our buildings and retrofit our buildings for the future. So for me, connecting everybody's point to that co-creation and collaboration is extremely important to truly create that future that we all want to embrace.
Thank you. That's quite a large statement. So you talked about the future. So let's wrap up with our last question then. One thing I've noticed is that every CIBSE member, of course, is different, but the one thing everybody has is that there's this absolutely overwhelming desire to support and help fellow engineers in their career. So this overwhelming need to pay it forward and help pave the way for others. So with that in mind, my final question to each one of you is, what's your pearl of wisdom that you would pass on to others in the industry as they're working through their own careers? So this question of if I'd have known then what I know now, what would be that you'd pass forward? So Annette, let's start with you on that.
I think mentors are really important for people when they're starting out in their career, and even as they're working through their career. I think a number of good mentors that can ask you some challenging questions and really make you think about things in a deeper way really helps you to adopt a growth mindset and to be open to new ideas and more innovative in your thinking. I think it's one of the most important things I've learned.
And do you also think, you talked about mentoring, which everyone would agree on that. Do you also think if you've got a mentor on one shoulder, you also need a sponsor, as it were, on the other shoulder, because a mentor questions, but a sponsor champions? Do you see that as a good mix, or do you think one should just focus on one or the other?
No, I think they're both important. I think it's probably easier to find a mentor than to find a sponsor sometimes.
Yeah.
But because everybody's at whatever stage they're in their career, they're all busy with their own lives and resolving their own solutions, problem-solving solutions at work. But I think it is good, if you can find somebody who has got the time to spend to sponsor you. It's definitely a benefit.
Thank you very much. Farah, your gift to pass forward.
I would say the power of asking.
Ooh,
it's a very simple statement, yes, but having the freedom of mind, especially for young engineers, to ask and not to think too much, I think that is a very important aspect. And because I can remember so many times in the early stages of my career where I didn't ask and then I Googled or something. But asking plays such a powerful role in sharing, and people are so open to share, especially in our CIBSE community and other communities. So I would really say the power of asking with an open mind is a pearl of knowledge that, yes, paid for. Yes.
Thank you, Farah. That's really, really good. Lucy.
Yeah, I guess I've only been in my career for a couple of years or so. So
we expect
quite short,
massive from you. Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest things I've taken so far, and it's all kind of led me to this being on this panel right now, I guess, is setting yourself goals that push you out of your comfort zone and push you forward. So say about 6 months to a year into my graduate role, I knew I kind of wanted to get a bit more involved in CIBSE and the groups, but that kind of, to me, was quite as intimidating, it was scary. As you say, engineers are quite introverted. But I was aware of the CIBSE Young Engineer Awards. I knew that the nominations were in about a year's time. So I set myself a goal of trying to be shortlisted for the awards, but I needed to do that. I needed to get involved in CIBSE groups and committees. I really wanted to do STEM outreach. I basically just used trying to get shortlisted for the award as the excuse and the push to get involved in all of these great communities that CIBSE provide. So I think, yeah, the one thing I've learned so far is if you want to do something, set yourself a goal that's going to push you to do it. And if you're like me, who wants to achieve that goal, you'll then force yourself to have to get involved and do things. And it's been great because obviously I've got the benefit of all the great CIBSE things that have come from winning the award. But I got involved in the CIBSE Young Energy Performance Group, as well. So that's been really great.
When you look at many big, great careers, pretty much all of them have had a catalyst that shifted the dial. And it's either been a person, from what you were saying, Annette, it's either been someone questioning themselves, or it's been a goal or something. So that catalyst is hugely important from what you're saying. Fiona, would you like to wrap it up?
So I think this is a little bit like Farah's and a little bit like Lucy's. There's this, you know more than you think you do. And so you can have the confidence to ask, because nobody's going to think you're stupid because you know more than you think you're going to do. But you have to have the confidence to do that. And actually, you probably have to understand why you're asking and where you're heading with it. So I think this thing of, I think sometimes people find they have sort of imposter syndrome, or that they need to have 10 years under their belt before they are considered competent. But actually, you can be competent much more quickly than that. And the more variety of things that you do, and the more that you ask, and the more things you try, actually, the broader your experience gets, and the better your perspective on the things you're learning is. So I think it comes quicker than you think it's going to. And knowing that before I started would have probably made me go a little faster, or try some things, or be a little braver a little earlier.
Perfect. That's an absolutely excellent way to end this session. So thank you very much to the four of you, Annette, Fiona, Lucy and Farah. Really appreciate it. And of course, thank you very much to everybody out there who's been listening and watching this session. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.